Yeah, probably.
Are you
Yes.
Hi, John Cleveland.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I'm told I'm supposed to come up here.
So, have you seen our presentations here?
Yeah.
Okay. So you know the deal.
Mm-hmm.
I will introduce you.
Okay.
We'll start the presentation, and we typically try to end it at 1 p.m. sharp.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll allow time for maybe 15 minutes at the end for questions, however you have it timed.
As well.
Okay.
Yeah, we've been doing like between 30 minutes, 30, 40 minutes.
Okay,
Is that
that's
okay?
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. And okay, yeah. So we'll do an introduction here in a minute. Let
Okay.
a couple more people filter in.
Okay.
What would you like me to say?
Maybe just say Steph Routh. She's the director of the
Pronounce it Routh.
Yeah, if you could. Just director of the Willamette Pedestrian Coalition, and their nonprofit advocacy organization.
Okay. And then anything else you'd like to say about yourself? Yeah,
Okay,
let
then
you
I'll
do
just.
that.
Okay, good. Okay.
Okay.
There's not much to say about me, so.
Okay. Well,
think-
yeah, sometimes people bring up something about their past work experience or education or something like that. But whatever you feel like is fine.
Okay.
Or nothing at all.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, great. Oh, lovely. Thank you so much. That's great. That's great. What? Yeah. Thanks for coming last night. That was great.
Okay, everyone. Let's begin our seminar. Today we are pleased to have with us Steph Routh from the Willamette Pedestrian Coalition. I'll just remind everyone that this is a seminar that is broadcast. We tape it, and it may be streaming online on the web. And the format that we usually do is we have usually about 35, 40, 45 minutes worth of presentation, and then you'll have the opportunity to ask questions at the end. And I'll remind everyone that when you do ask questions that you have the mics on your desks in front of you, and that you should touch if the red light comes on, it means the mic is working. And if it isn't working, let me know, and I will come around with a handheld mic and enable you to ask your questions. So welcome. This is the transportation seminar that we put on along. My name is John Glebe. I'm an assistant professor in the School of Urban Studies and Planning. And we also have here Professor Miguel Figliozzi, associate professor from civil engineering. This seminar is also coordinated with the help of OTREC, John Mackler and Ryan Gratzer, and Professor Jennifer Dill. So without further ado, I would like to turn the presentation over to Steph, and she will provide a brief introduction and a very informative presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for being here today. And before I start, I just want to acknowledge two people who have really helped make Getting Around on Foot Action Plan happen, and that's our former board president, Phil Sellinger, who's in the audience, and Katie Uri, our vice president. This has been a two-year study and report that has just taken a lot of work from board members, volunteers, and we are just really thrilled to have them in the audience today. So really quickly, Willamette Pedestrian Coalition is entering into its 20th year. We were founded in 1991 to make the conditions for walking safe, convenient, and attractive to everyone in the Portland metropolitan region. So we're just going to talk a little bit about why walking matters, about getting around on foot, what the study methods were, what we had 3 top emerging themes that came out of it, 12 key findings, 10 actions that we're looking at going forward, and how you can get involved in the future. So first, why? I think always the first question we should always ask ourselves is why. So why walking? There are a number of reasons. Health, safety, finances, equity, environmental benefits, and fostering community. Equity is an incredibly important aspect of walking as a transportation mode because not everyone can drive, not everyone can bike, and walking really encompasses the spectrum of the human experience and that everyone walks at some point in the day. And not everyone drives, not everyone can afford to drive. Obviously the environmental benefits and fostering community. Specifically health, the average school commute for a student is 2/3 of the recommended daily allotment for exercise. And walking up to 2 miles a day has been known to decrease chronic diseases such as type 2 diabetes, stroke, heart disease, etc. Traffic safety, this is last year's, can I move around? Excellent, okay. So this is our pedestrian crashes just in Portland from 2000 to 2009. And you can't necessarily see the names of the streets, but I think if you look, you can identify 82nd Avenue, and also 122nd, Powell, Division, and Barber. And anyone who has been on those streets has an idea there are numerous multiple lanes, higher traffic corridors that Portland has identified as high crash corridors. They also have a couple of other attributes which are significant for pedestrians that most of those, 82nd Avenue, for example, hosts the 72 bus, and Division, the number 4 bus. And those are the numbers 2 and 1 in terms of ridership in the TriMet system. And so that's that access to and from the bus. Those are really important pedestrian corridors, and also very high crash. And when those crashes occur, they occur at high speeds and usually above 40 miles an hour. At 40 miles an hour, the fatality rate of a pedestrian is 95%, as opposed to 20 miles an hour, which is 5%. So yeah, and the only other thing I'll say about traffic safety and those specific corridors is they also house a number of other pedestrian destinations. Like if you think of where your local Fred Meyers are or your Walgreens are, those are likely on arterial streets, on major streets. Personal finance, one thing, my favorite statistic is 2008 U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics showed that the average American household spent the same, almost dollar for dollar, on gasoline as it spent on health care. And we talk a lot about how expensive health care is in our country, but we don't talk about how expensive our transportation needs are and how much gas costs. So our sponsors, very quickly, this report and study and action plan was brought to you by Northwest Health Foundation, Federal Transit Administration's Jobs Access Reverse Commute program, and also to Kittleson, who helped us print. And I'll just say also at the end of this, I have a little bit about WPC, but also our executive summary of our Getting Around on Foot action plan, which you're welcome to take home with you. So this is why what we hope to achieve with the action plan. We want it to serve as a guide to laying the groundwork for a strategic pedestrian network that would allow people to live and move in their communities. Study methods. We had resident surveys, both online and in person. We got about between 850 and 900 responses throughout the metro region. We also looked at neighborhood associations and got a number of 32 responses from CPOs, or community planning organizations, and neighborhood associations. Excuse me. We held interviews with 19 of the jurisdictions within the Portland metropolitan region to get an idea of what they saw in terms of pedestrian priorities for improvement, what the needs were and what the challenges were. Thanks to PSU's students through Professor Monsieur's class, we did neighborhood case studies, which were really on-the-ground assessments of archetypical pedestrian environments, and then excuse me, and then looked at transportation system plans throughout the metropolitan region as well as the regional transportation plan, and kind of gathered those all up. These are the jurisdictions that in which we did looked at transportation system plans and also did jurisdiction reviews. And here's what we learned, that some TSPs called for annual set-aside bike ped funding, others did not. And again, funding, this came up over and over again, that funding for walking, because like for a mile of sidewalks, it can be expensive, and it's not funded currently. So TSP, and I'll just, for future transportation system plans, I'm going to use the acronym TSP if that's okay. Some of the functional classifications for roadways are silent on required and planned pedestrian treatments. Citizen transportation committees we found to be a really important component of community engagement in ongoing planning processes within jurisdictions. Also the role of the business community to help identify pedestrian needs and opportunities, and to make that case for economic development in pedestrian coordinators, corridors. And also that too often sidewalks and intersections are improved only as part of a larger roadway widening process. So as a road gets widened, they will add sidewalks, and oftentimes those are, that's considered a PED project. But when you are widening the roadway, you're increasing the crossing distance and creating more vulnerability for crossing. So we actually would not necessarily call a road widening project a pedestrian project. And then also you have, for example, you have some areas where jurisdictions have started off as rural or suburban and have increased in density. For example, Washington County has increased 400% in population in the last 20 years, and that has, and yet the needs of those communities have changed over time, and so how now do you kind of retrofit that connectivity? And so some jurisdictions, and just a shout out to Tualatin Hills Parks and Rec Department, for example, are looking at mid-block street crossings as a way to increase connectivity for pedestrians between intersections. And we did hear from a few jurisdictions that that there's a priority on exclusivity rather than connectivity, which brings about more cul-de-sacs, for example, which are really difficult in terms of pedestrian connectivity. The idea of where you can get to in 20 minutes is markedly different if you live at the end of a cul-de-sac. So these were our neighborhood case studies, and again, we had groups of students go through and really help us with on-the-ground assessments, whether sidewalks were present, what the conditions of them were, curbs, how many lanes, crossing distances, just a number of attributes we wanted to check out, and we wanted to kind of get archetypical pedestrian environments. So, for example, a downtown, Portland downtown, we have a Hazelwood neighborhood, a regional center. We also have a neighborhood that has in Maplewood Southwest that has topographical issues. Highland along TV Highway, and downtown in Tiger. And this is when we did our resident surveys. This is part of the short form, and we also had a long form. It was an attitudinal behavioral study that asked people what their, how often they walked, where they walked when they walked, and if they didn't often, where didn't they walk and why, as well as some other questions. And one of our favorites was, what is your pet peeve location? Where do you really think needs to be changed if you had to choose one place, and why, and how would you do it? We also had another one, which was another favorite. Like if you were king of the world and you could make any change that you want, what would that change be? And I'll just mention also that on our website is the full report in PDF and also the appendices. And the appendices are great. They have all of the quotes of people's responses, and just going through and getting an idea for how they relate to walking in their daily lives and what they had to say about it is just a great read. 70 pages, you'll love it. But this is what we learned from resident surveys, just what generally was their highest concern, and what they felt was the biggest need. And quite frankly, when I started, I was pretty new to pedestrian advocacy. I started with bike advocacy. I thought that sidewalks were going to be the big thing. You hear a lot about people wanting sidewalks, and lack of sidewalks was definitely up there, but it was in context, we found, with conflicts with vehicles, dangerous speeds, and dangerous street conditions. So really people were identifying safety as a large concern, and specifically with vehicles. And as we went more into it, we realized that it was really about safe crossings, which we'll come to later. But so from neighborhoods, this is kind of what we learned, that access to neighborhood centers need to be a priority, that people want to be able to access resources locally within a 20-minute neighborhood. Unprotected, like unmarked, unsignalized crosswalks with poor lighting were problematic because there was an issue with compliance of drivers to stop. That suburban areas, and this is one thing we've heard loud and clear from Southwest Portland, for example, that people would settle for decent road shoulders, a less than full build of sidewalks to be able to walk, because often, especially areas that are topographically challenged, you'll see a ditch, where instead of a sidewalk, and so you end up walking along the fog line, which is not a best case scenario. And also there's frustration with the lack of enforcement of existing laws. And that again goes to oftentimes enforcement agencies won't do enforcement actions on unmarked crossings or poorly lit crossings because there are issues with having that hold up in court, among other things. So we had three emerging themes that came from all of this data. And again, as I said before, safe crossings. At the end of the day, people said that they really just wanted to get across the street. And some of their major issues were poorly lit crossings, that they weren't marked, that they were, when they were signalized, the timing of those signals was short, and especially as our region is aging, and in aging communities, the time, you need a little more time to get across the street. And also the number of vehicles, as we talked about earlier on major arterials, can be 5, 7 lanes, and that's a lot of lanes to get across. And each additional lane carries with it what's called the multiple threat problem of one lane will stop, and even though the next lane is obligated to stop, oftentimes they don't see and they just don't stop. Our second one, that people really want a place to walk to if they're going to walk. Ian Lockwood and Dan Burden call this rewarding the short trip, that you have access within your neighborhood to parks, to restaurants, to pharmacies, hospitals, grocery stores, etc. And the idea of the 20-minute neighborhood. But I do want to mention again with major streets that a 20-minute neighborhood, if there's a major street going through it, you don't have a 20-minute neighborhood. You have 2 10-minute neighborhoods that don't give neighbors the resources they need. And the third was universal access. We talked earlier about equity and the needs of walking, and that there is the spectrum of abilities, and that we need to be planning for all of those. And this is, again, in Southwest Portland, and oftentimes, like when there isn't a sidewalk, then people have to be in the bike lane, which degrades that infrastructure for both bikes and peds. And one thing I'll mention, just as a preview to coming attractions, Portland related to universal access. Portland is one of 10 cities that is undergoing a pilot project for audible detection signals. So it's a study that's being funded through the National Eye Institute to look at, especially for crossings that aren't perpendicular, that are at an angle and have acoustical issues, people with visual impairments, how they know where to walk and when. So there's a lot of components to access. And again, details matter in terms of access. A small sidewalk gap, a bus stop that doesn't have sidewalks or crossing to it, or a grate that's facing the wrong way or too wide. This creates insuperable barriers to members of our region. We had 12 key findings. I'll just do a shout out to our board member, Roger Averback, did these pictures, and just some of them are awesome. Again, safe crossings. Yes. I don't actually, I think, need to introduce these necessarily. So safe crossings, closing sidewalk gaps, the fact that this sign exists anywhere, and that, that I think most of us see this every day. This is in North Portland. Equity, again, that we have going back to transit, that 90% of our region's population is within half a mile of a bus stop, but only 69% of those bus stops have sidewalk access. 4 out of 5 of TriMet users access service on foot. Oh, I'm sorry. So what did I just say? 90% of the region's population is within half a mile of a bus stop, but only 69% of those have access via sidewalks. 4 out of 5 of TriMet users access service by bus, or I'm sorry, on foot. Yeah. One thing I'll just mention while we're talking about when we're looking at this, TriMet is currently working on a pedestrian network analysis, which looks at bus stop improvements, particularly along frequent lines and boardings related to people who are number of ramp deployments and people who request paratransit lift service to see what bus stop improvements, crossings and closing sidewalk gaps can allow the most people to access bus stops rather than having to rely on paratransit, which a lot of people have to do now. Again, designing for all abilities. This is one of my most and least favorite pictures. So planning at a human scale. If you can just look at this picture for a second and try to find the person in it. And you won't, because there isn't one. And over the last number of decades, we've made infrastructural investments that have enabled us to get around by car. But this, imagining how someone would either navigate this or navigate around it on foot or by bike, and what those investments are going to need to be in the future in order to do that. We have a pretty significant retrofitting challenge before us, which again goes back to funding. Oh, I'm sorry. The picture, if you can see big pink. So this is the west.
The Routh Sound Bridge?
Yep. Yeah. It's the cluster of connectivity. Yeah, it's in Portland. Calming traffic. One thing that a number of planners in Metro will talk about is going back to traffic safety, that calming traffic and making it safer for cycling and walking actually makes it safer for everyone. So regardless of what mode you take, everyone benefits from traffic calming. Again, combining transit with walking. Providing infrastructure priorities. This was a walk-along in outer East Portland, right on the cusp of Gresham, with the Pedestrian Advisory Committee as we were looking at priorities for improvement in that area. We talked earlier about street connectivity and exclusivity versus connectivity. So this is this, I believe, is Southwest. And again, imagining a 20-minute neighborhood, what someone at the edge of that lollipop could access in 20 minutes. Trail connectivity. And this is a great one. This is, I believe it's the Fano Creek Trail out near Tigard. So, and again, Tualatin Hills Parks and Rec Department recently requested that mid-block crossings be included as buildable structures, basically in Washington County, and that is a recent policy change, and an important one because in those areas where there isn't connectivity on streets, that doing urban trails to allow safe access to, in this case, like it's right near the library, is important. Engaging communities, and we will come back to this again and again, because really it's communities and the people who use those facilities every day are the ones that have the understanding of what the community needs and what those opportunities are. Funding it, one of the questions that we asked of the residential survey, and we know it's maybe perhaps a little bit skewed because these are people who are filling out a survey of walking needs. We asked them how many cents out of every transportation dollar they think should go to walking, and the average was about 20 cents out of the dollar, which we're not getting now. But it's actually not. I don't think it's actually all that skewed, because Washington County in 2008, the Washington County Coordinating Committee, for example, asked, for their next major street transportation improvement program, what percentage local residents wanted to be spent on different types of modes. And so people said 13% on walking, 13% on biking, and 20% on bus and rail. So actually it's not so different from what people told us. Creating partnerships, that there are potential co-benefits by leveraging funding and planning between jurisdictions and between agencies. So for example, having environmental services and Bureau of Transportation working together to have multiple benefits from the same project can leverage scarce resources in this economic climate, and also really make innovative projects that improve local communities. So we came up with 10 actions that we're looking to decision makers to put forward. One, incorporating these key findings in transportation system plans. The regional transportation plan was adopted in the summer of last year, and so as a result, all jurisdictions in the metropolitan region are expected to update their transportation system plans, and we would, through that update, really like these key findings to be included in those plan updates. Also, evaluation is really important and critical for ongoing investments. Being able to identify what return on investment, what outcomes come of investing in walking and biking infrastructure. But that needs to be included in the project itself. Prioritizing and funding projects that improve access to transit. And again, just a quick plug, I believe in July, TriMet's pedestrian network analysis is going to come out. Willamette Pedestrian Coalition is on the technical advisory committee, and it is just a really remarkable project. And we think that should be also included going forward, those findings. Bringing pedestrians mind early in the process. Again, we talked about what the goal of this action plan was, and it's to create a strategic pedestrian network that connects people to the resources that they need easily, safely, and conveniently. And so that means that walking has to be considered early in the process, not kind of just adding sidewalks at the end of road widening projects again. And that land use development should be also included, again, rewarding the short trip and having those resources close by. Standalone PED projects in capital improvement projects. So if you are involved in a bike PED advisory committee or are able to testify before a budget that goes before the city council, really asking for capital pedestrian and pedestrian bike projects. And again, allocating funding specifically for ped and bike projects. That specific funding mechanisms, and this is becoming more. It only becomes more and more important in difficult economic times. That funding mechanisms that are dedicated to ped and bike infrastructure will allow us to look longer term rather than purely opportunistically. And regional flexible funds. Continuing to target a meaningful percentage. It's currently 75% for bike and ped and 25%-ish for green freight. And here's one of my favorites, and that's staffing and forming bike and pedestrian advisory committees. Tigard recently formed a bike and ped subcommittee, which has just, I think they're in their 4th month, and they're just a really fabulous, energetic group of people who are able to look at projects and also look at larger planning processes. And we're talking Washington County again. Sorry to bring up Washington County, but it's the 2nd most populous county in the state. That Washington County is actually talking about developing a ped and bike advisory committee, which I think will be really important and exciting as they update their transportation system plan. But this is bike and ped advisory committees do more than just provide an opportunity to bring projects and plans and to be able to comment. It's really, I think, vocational training for citizen participation in a really important investment in our region, and that's transportation. It's something that everyone depends on, and to provide that opportunity to engage citizens to really understand what the process is, and then to be able to provide outreach to their friends and neighbors, I think is something, it's such a critical element of transportation planning, and it needs to be considered, it needs to be staffed, and it needs to be engaged. Public and private partners, again, we talked about in the key findings, looking at creating partnerships and a seamless network, pedestrian network, and bringing health officials that looking at health impacts of our transportation investments is a really important component. So getting involved. Obviously, we are a membership-based organization, so getting involved with us. We do email updates, advisory committee meetings. Again, there's a number of projects. Last night, for example, there was the Southwest Multnomah Boulevard open house, as well as East Portland Action Plan, as well as, what else was last night? I'm sorry? Our gala event, and there was one other, I'll remember it. Portland-Milwaukee Light Rail. And that was last night. So there's no shortage of opportunities to be involved. And starting off by attending your local neighborhood association, neighborhood coalition, bike ped advisory committee, and getting to know what the issues are and how you can be engaged and how you can engage others is really important. Also, testifying in person and in writing to City Council. Just one event coming up next month, the Oregon Active Transportation Summit. It has in the past been the Oregon Bike Summit, but we're moving to broaden the umbrella, and that's next month, the 29th and 30th in Salem. And that's an opportunity to, there'll be a number of keynotes talking about road financing, talking about transportation health equity, and infrastructure priorities and innovations. So it's a great chance with a lot of high-level individuals, so it's a great learning opportunity and connecting opportunity. So again, Walking Matters for health, safety, and finance, equity, environmental benefits such as climate change. I'll just mention in terms of the climate change, before I was with the Willamette Pedestrian Coalition, since we have a few minutes to vamp, before I was with the Willamette Pedestrian Coalition, I was with an international development organization that does renewable energy and sustainable water systems. And that was the idea of that was energy resiliency in vulnerable communities internationally. But the other aspect of that, so it's energy access as a social justice issue, but really locally, it's about energy conservation and climate change, and the biggest component to climate change that we see is transportation. So locally, it's all about transportation in terms of preserving environmental benefits. And fostering community. There's, I like to call it the front porch credit. You know, you have people who are on the front porch, and you get to know your neighbors. You know, you just feel safer when other people are out walking. The eyes on the street concept. Letter walkers, our letter carriers. I found out in a This American Life episode about how letter carriers do more. They stop burglaries and thefts because they know the neighborhood, and they're able to help those neighbors in need because they just interact with everyone on the street every day. So fostering community and emerging themes, again, safe crossings, absolutely critical. Walkable destinations, rewarding the short trip, and providing, looking at zoning in terms of making sure those resources are locally available and walkably available, and allowing everyone to access. So that's me. Thank you. And if you have any questions, I don't know how the questions parts work. Yes, ma'am.
So I wanted to go back to your funding topic, and not just whether or not the survey respondents felt that these pedestrian improvements should be funded, but how. Did you get a sense as to, you know, whether they would approve it if it just was a matter of redistributing funds that were already existing, or would they be okay with an increase in taxes if that's what it was going to take? I'm just curious if you were able to get a sense to that level.
That's a great question. So we did talk to, for example, one neighborhood association that Phil and I went to that said, you know, we are so hungry for sidewalk improvements, we would be willing to chip in with a local improvement district. So people are looking at different funding pots. I think that I'm on the Portland Bureau of Transportation Budget Advisory Committee, and there are a number of neighborhood representatives from Sweeney, Southwest Neighbors Incorporated, and East Portland Action Plan. that really want to look at traffic safety and bike and ped as a higher percentage level of funding through the capital improvement project. So that is one. Going back to, again, it's only because I've been spending a fair amount of time there, Washington County. They have a permanently bonded that was passed by taxpayers, the Major Street Transportation Improvement Program, which is actually not raised from vehicular taxes, it's from property taxes. So I think that there's a lot of models that people have expressed willingness to do. I think that that obviously the quickest and the easiest is to look at our current funding streams and how we can maximize benefit to vulnerable road users. And again, as we said earlier, that calming traffic, I think that this is an important message, that calming traffic and providing for ped and bike infrastructure actually helps everyone. And I think that that's a meme that is really putting forward. Did that answer your question? Okay, thank you.
A lot of the actions that you listed seem to be what cities could do to help with, walking. What can neighborhoods or community members do? Do you have suggestions for that?
Well, one, and I should have mentioned the other thing that we were hoping, besides that this be a call to action for decision makers, we also want this to be a resource for neighbors to articulate what needs they can ask for, or what they have already told us that they want, and to articulate that. So, but I do think asking for getting on a budget advisory committee, again, looking at the budgets and attending open houses, and then again, bike ped advisory committees are great forums for asking questions, getting answers, and then being able to do follow-up questions. So, yes, sir.
Can you talk a little bit about what, if anything, is being done to educate people about pedestrian rights and responsibilities and unmarked crosswalks and things like that?
Oh boy! So you just gave me the biggest opening ever. So, so we actually work. We work closely with a local attorney of Swanson, Thomas & Kuhn, who gives a regular bike and ped legal clinics to get an idea of people's legal rights and responsibilities. We've historically, I'll just tell you what we've been doing, because I know that best, but we've been working with the Bicycle Transportation Alliance to administer a grant called the Pedestrian Safety Enforcement Grant that is given by ODOT every year to enforcement agencies that does crosswalk enforcement actions. And so those are specifically granted to enforcement agencies statewide. And next month we're doing the training for that. And all agencies from all over the state come in, and we talk about those crosswalk actions and how they can be maximized to help not just enforcement, but also education in communities through outreach beforehand and press releases. And then the other, we actually just got a contract with the Portland's Bureau of Transportation to do crosswalk safety education and enforcement, because pedestrian safety enforcement actions, they usually take anywhere from 2 to 5 police officers. So that can, per one, in the last 5 years, the Bureau of Transportation has been over 900 citations in 5 years of monthly crosswalk enforcement actions. And that's been so important. They're looking to maximize that. So we're actually going to be doing education. So we'll be, instead of pulling people over, we're going to write down their their license plates, and they're going to get a letter in the mail talking about what crosswalk laws are going forward. Thank you very much. And we're really excited about that, especially because a recent conversation with the Bureau of Transportation, they said that it would be okay. I will be doing it and endangering my own life, not other people's, but we will be doing a couple of actions in the evening when a lot of crashes occur, and also at unmarked crossings where non-compliance is highest. So there's that, and also just from a purely educational component. Last Friday, we've done a know your rights and responsibilities with senior centers, and also like last Friday I did with IRCO, the Immigrant Refugee Community Organization. So it was about I think 100 of their clients that translated into 6 different languages about transportation options, but also like your major responsibilities and rights. That's all I got. But yeah. Alexis.
I just had a quick question about one of the pie chart labels that you had, so if you can scroll
Yeah.
back to it, that'd be great.
Sorry, guys. Wow, we have a lot of slides. We'll get there someday.
That one. What is dangerous street conditions specifically?
That was kind of that's a good question. That was kind of a catch-all for number of lanes. For example, high speeds together. I'm sorry? Blind curves. Yeah. Anyone else? Jeff?
Could you speak to any recent successes with local leaders or any government officials that might have received this report positively, or is there anything else that we can do to help kind of get the word out and get this to local leaders?
Mm-hmm. Well, we had, even in just the interviews with jurisdictions and talking with, for example, talking to Washington County's new Land Use and Transportation Director, and talking about Bike Ped Advisory Committee, and like last week at the Washington County Coordinating Committee, he actually pulled that out as one of his priorities that he thought had merits that they would be looking into as part of their TSP. Personally, that is my big favorite, I could die happily tomorrow moment. But we also, just talking generally about the need for funding, and that has been a theme that we've shared, and the city of Portland has done some really great crossings. A few of our favorites, 46th and Belmont, that is right in front of the Southeast Multicultural Center. Another of my personal favorites is 130th and Gleason, because last year I did pedestrian safety education through Safe Routes to School with Merlot Park Elementary School, and it was really hard. The second day, you're supposed to, go on a walk with the kids, and so we learned all about what to do when there aren't sidewalks, and it was really hard because it's a place that's challenged in terms of connectivity, and so creating that crossing that is significantly between an elementary school and an elder care facility, and talking to residents in the elder care facility, that one of them, we talked for a good 10 minutes, and she volunteers once a week at the elementary school, but she can't use the pedestrian bridge because of mobility reasons, and so she has to go a quarter mile out of her way to get across the street so she can volunteer for a reading program. And now she just, jaunts across whenever she feels like it, and that's huge. So those are some of my faves. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, I can't remember 2 minutes late. But is your area includes Clackamas County?
Yeah.
And if so, tell me about Oh, sorry. Does your area include Clackamas County? And if so, tell us, you said a lot about Washington County.
Yeah.
How are the policymakers match up in Clackamas?
And we haven't, we have mostly spent time in Multnomah and Washington counties. But that said, for example, Lynn Peterson in Clackamas County has been a great champion of active transportation, and Metro is looking at, they're having conversations. Last night at our gala, Rex Burkholder did a great presentation where he showed what the best pedestrian connectivity is in various areas. You know, and in Portland, you'll see the downtown core, and in Clackamas Town Center, for example, you'll see inside the mall as the most connective area. So I think that there's a lot of the jurisdictions that that we've talked to, a number of them, Clackamas County itself, the planners are looking at ways to leverage those investments. And Phil.
Well, I was just going to point out that we found the city of Milwaukee, as an example, there in Clackamas County, was pretty much a standout in terms of identifying pedestrian projects, not add-on projects. They really have a TSP, a Transportation Systems Plan, that distinguishes pedestrian projects as standalone priorities.
And also with Milwaukee, they have a new like mini pedestrian improvement grant program that they're looking to specifically involve the neighborhood associations in, which is a great pilot. Thank you, Phil.
I have a follow-up. I live in Lake Oswego, and it's quite a challenge come from the hills to bus number 35. I sold my second car, and it's because I'm an advocate, but it's quite a challenge.
And you know, Lake Oswego is a great example. The downtown core, beautiful curbs, great crossings, and then you get out, you know, a couple of blocks, you know, away in the residential areas, and for any number of reasons, including, I mean, sometimes neighborhood associations themselves, you know, don't necessarily want to see sidewalk improvements. Yeah, I'm with you. Yes, ma'am. Oh, actually, let's. Yes, sir.
Just a quick question. I'm sorry if I missed this, but you mentioned this map that has places where connectivity is really great in different counties. Where might one find those types of things?
Oh, I'm sorry. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, you mentioned places in either Multnomah County or Clackamas County or elsewhere where, you know, particular intersections or regions are really connective, and I think that you were talking about a particular map where you could really see where these different things are.
Yeah.
Is there a particular place where you can find that sort of thing?
Well, the one last night that I was referring to is kind of like hot spots, like they're looking at the blue. And I believe that's on Metro's website, but I can't remember exactly. How about I'll follow up, and if I can find that, I'll send it to Ryan. That'd be okay? That'd be great. Suzanne.
Yes, I want to congratulate the coalition. You did such a terrific job on this. It's really a model for cities across the country. I wondered whether the city of Portland had come to you, because they are trying to create neighborhood centers, or whether you have considered doing a survey to find out what people in each of the neighborhoods would like to see to make their neighborhood walkable, to create neighborhood centers that are within walking distance.
And 20-minute neighborhoods that's a great question. Thank you. We love you too. That the 20-minute neighborhoods are really the building block of the Portland plan that is currently underway. So those 20-minute neighborhoods are being heavily surveyed through the Portland plan, but we've also had a number of conversations with planning staff and traffic safety staff. Well, thank you. Well, and last night, actually, we were talking with mayor's staff and putting it before City Council as to identify needs and hope for follow-up. Thank you. I don't know if we only have a few minutes left.
A couple more.
Oh, okay. Oh.
Hi again. So I recognize that bicyclists and pedestrians have a lot of similar needs, but you know, certainly there comes a point where pedestrian needs are far different than a bicycle need. And throughout your presentation, it seemed like bike and ped got kind of lumped together in a lot of ways. I don't know. And so I'm just curious, you know, as the Willamette Pedestrian Coalition and as you guys are doing your surveys, if you ever got a sense from respondents as far as just prioritizing pedestrian needs over bicyclist needs, given this, you know, equitable access and, you know, that walking is something everyone can do and, you know, not everyone owns a bike, or if they had one, they probably wouldn't ride it. So I was curious if those sorts of concerns ever came up.
Mm-hmm. I swear I did not plant this woman. So this was a big topic, a huge topic at the recent Pro Walk, Pro Bike conference in Chattanooga. And this idea of, because oftentimes they do get, you know, it's the alliance of biking and walking, you know, for example, that they are very close, and in some cases, bike and ped, they align perfectly. Oftentimes, they're parallel, but they function, we find, a little differently. Like one example that we talk with a lot to the city of Portland, and I talk about the city of Portland a fair amount because this is Portland State University, that, for example, neighborhood greenways are really, they were originally called bike boulevards. They're really great about getting people off of the, and I'll just go back, actually, since we have a minute. Traffic safety. Okay, so instead of going on, you know, biking on 82nd to be able to move a little bit off, or instead of Division, you shift a few blocks to Clinton Street, and I think that's absolutely incredibly important for bike safety, and, you know, and calming those streets is great for the local residents. And the high crash corridors is really important themselves, is important for pedestrian connectivity, because people, those bus stops are on those major corridors, and they're not going to move to Clinton. So I think that is kind of one difference, marked difference that we see is, you know, where you can shift and where you can't shift, and you have to take that line and realize that is the corridor that needs to be improved. Yeah, really quick, Ben. I think this is the last one.
Well, staying on this map, some of these high incident corridors are state facilities, you know, such as PAL. I'm wondering if you have any insight sort of into jurisdictional and funding issues between state and local areas, and then how you feel about some of these proposals for more local control, such as like the speed limit legislation going on right now.
I'm just going to go with a tiny little, because that's that's huge. But one bill that Earl Blumenauer put forward in the last congressional session was the Orphan Highways bill, and that was, the idea is, you know, oftentimes, for example, Powell, an example, is owned and maintained by the Oregon Department of Transportation. However, you know, oftentimes urban freeways, they are within the neighborhood of a city, and oftentimes, like, ODOT doesn't necessarily want, you know, the state DOTs don't necessarily want to maintain those, but they need to be raised to a level of service where the city is willing to take it over. So the idea with the Orphan Highways bill, which I hope comes back, is to provide incentives, to provide funding to bring those up to a level of service, so that then the city could take those over without incurring a large financial burden. Yeah. So I think that's one very specific that wouldn't it be wonderful? Wouldn't it be great in this reauthorization bill? So I think that's all we have. Thank you guys so very much for being a delightful audience.
Okay, and I'll remind everyone that next week, February 25th, our presentation will be Portland's cycle track and buffered bike lanes. Are they working? This is a study by Chris Monsier and Nathan McNeil from PSU. So be sure to attend that if you can.